Thank you all for being here, taking some time out of your week to learn about how you can get your message to your senators or your House reps. And tonight, well, I've got Kyle, my coworker, running in the background doing our recording and keeping an eye on the Zoom end of things. And then we're joined by Jennifer Mamola at the John Muir Project. Do you want to just give yourself a quick introduction there, Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. Really appreciate you putting this together. My name is Jen. I am the Policy and Advocacy Director with the John Muir Project. I am a California native based in our nation's capital. We attempt to dampen the firephobic rhetoric around wildfires while trying to advocate to work from the community out rather than the wild in when it comes to wildfire protection for communities. So I am often telling Congress what they're doing wrong, which they really genuinely appreciate, and try and get them on the right track. So yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you guys today and see how we can up the pressure and protect our treasured public lands that are very fire adapted. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, Jen. As I like to do, I like to start each webinar with a land acknowledgement. Of course, we're all in different places, so it's impossible to kind of do true justice to this idea. But for me personally, I am in Kitsap County, which is the home of the Suquamish people, and this is straight from their organization. They start with a quote from Chief Seattle: "Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished." I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is within the ancestral territory of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea as they have for thousands of years. Here, the Suquamish live and protect the land and water of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Um, and we do at LFDC, we do try and engage with tribes as much as possible, and really they've been a big advocate, we've worked pretty closely with them, especially on state issues, and we're just only really starting to engage with them more on federal issues. But we have a lot of good partners at some of the tribes in the area, and we certainly have room to improve on that and keep working in that department. But it is something that's a pretty thankfully it's an effective way to make good change in the world. So. Just quick overview of some of the things that we'll be talking about tonight. Kind of just start off with a little bit of context why it's more important than ever to engage with your Congress people. We'll talk a little bit about exactly who, especially focusing on the West Coast, basically Washington, or who are the decision makers, who are the people that are really kind of the first ones to decide whether a bill is going to advance or not. We'll briefly talk about kind of Civics 101 and how a bill goes from a staffer's office or a congressperson's office all the way eventually to the president's desk. We'll, of course, talk the most of tonight. We'll be talking about how to actually get in touch with your congresspeople as effectively as possible, some specific strategies, kind of more approach or philosophical things as far as kind of just trying to get habits, sort of. And the one thing that we'll dive into pretty detailed is happens when you call a congressperson and when you are speaking to hopefully eventually getting through to a staffer. And we'll have some time for question and hopefully answering some questions as well. Without further ado, just looking at this map here on the right, I think it's a pretty powerful argument for why to engage with our congresspeople on public land issues. So 400 years ago or so, we had about 75% more forest, at least as far as density is concerned, here in the and that's just been whittled away. Most of that in the last 150 years or so, especially since chainsaws became a thing. That really expedited things, and then even more with solar bunchers and the rest. The federal government is one of the largest land managers. They really are the largest single land manager in the country. So over a quarter of the lower 48 is under the control of either the Forest Service, the BLM, the National Park Service, and a few of the smaller organizations. And we really rely on them more than just a pleasant walk through the woods. They're a source of drinking water. They're a source of especially here in Washington, we have pretty hot summers now. And you walk into the woods, and you can instantly feel the temperature drop 20 degrees inside a healthy forest with good canopy cover, all the biodiversity, all the different ways that the forest is providing services to the American public, and the federal government being the steward of a lot of that land. And it's, I think, important to just, a lot of folks are maybe a little bit familiar with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. I think a lot of people think that it's the National Environmental Protection Act, and I think that's a really important thing to know, that NEPA actually was really never that strong of a guardrail against bad actors extracting resources from our public lands. And really kind of just every year, every few years at least, there's some little new crack or new little piece chipped off of NEPA anyway. And so they're really, in a lot of ways, the forests have less protection than they have in a very long time. And they were really never that to begin with. So that's why we're here doing what we're doing. So who in Washington, Oregon, and California have a say in what goes through Congress? So this is well, I'm not going to read through everything. This is really for you to be able to refer back to down the road when you're like, hey, who should I call about this thing? So you can see it's kind of color coded by state there. But these are the committee assignments. So every member of Congress has multiple committee assignments. There's also subcommittees. It can get pretty complicated. All different meetings that they're going to, and mailing lists and that they're having to keep track of. But these are the folks that are going to have kind of be the first ones to decide whether a bill is going to get seriously considered. So if we kind of go to Schoolhouse Rock and how does it become law? It's going to start obviously drafted in somebody's office. They're going to write the text and decide what they want to see become law. And that member is going to introduce the bill. We're just assuming maybe we're starting in the House. It really can actually start in either chamber, but it's quite common for bills to start in the House. So it'll get introduced into the House. The leadership of the House will decide which committee it gets referred to. That's really not usually a whole lot of debate about that. It's usually pretty cut and dry which committees should be taking on which bills that have been introduced. Once it's in committee, it'll have some hearings. If there's controversy or debate, they'll go through a markup process. It was kind of the first round of editing that bill will get, at least serious editing. And then eventually the committee will vote on it. A lot of times they only bring it to a vote if they think it's going to pass. So that's why some things just die in committee if they don't, whoever the committee leadership is. And that's generally whoever has control of that chamber. So right now, both the House and the Senate are controlled by the Republicans. So the Republicans kind of have the helm on all of the committees. So they decide when votes happen and when a lot of different things come to pass within the committees. Eventually, the committee is going to vote on it. If it gets passed, it gets put on the calendar for that chamber, and that will be the first time that the entire chamber is going to look seriously at the bill. They'll read it a few times. They'll have a debate on it. A lot of times there'll be amendments suggested, and those may or may not get votes. Eventually, if this bill is going to become law, it's going to get passed by the House and sent to the Senate. And they sometimes there's bills, sister bills where each chamber is simultaneously considering a piece of legislation. It's actually quite common. But a lot of times there's slightly different wording and they have to agree on the exact same wording. So the bill will sometimes kind of go back and forth between the two chambers until they settle on an agreed text of the bill. Once that's done, a other chamber will pass it. Once both chambers have passed it, then the enrollment happens, which is kind of the Speaker of the House signing off on it and literally putting it on a fancy piece of paper, which eventually gets taken to the Oval Office for the president to sign. So it is quite a drawn out process, which in some ways is good. It gives us a lot of opportunity to try and influence the outcome of a certain piece of legislation. It gives the bills multiple opportunities to be changed for better or worse. And it certainly means that multiple Congress people are going to have an opportunity to vote and make their hopefully their constituents' voices and opinions a part of the outcome of that law. I think this is you, Jen. Is this where we're switching over?
Good. Thanks,
Yeah.
Andy. Appreciate that overview. Yeah, so I'm going to focus mostly on federal staffers at this time. We will briefly touch on local staffers in your state and districts. So, as you can imagine, members of Congress are very busy. Whether it's a good busy or bad busy, that's to be debated. But ultimately, their staffers are their gatekeepers. And not all staffers are the same. So every office has staff members, but then every committee also has staff, and sometimes there's a little bit of overlap. Ultimately, it's best just to stick with your office staffer unless you really want to get into the weeds of a bill that you're really concerned about or really hoping that will pass this Congress. We're currently in the 119th Congress. Every Congress is 2 years. We're in the second session at the moment. So there's a lot of bills. I think the last I checked, the House had almost 10,000. And that's not always in, say, the environmental space. Obviously, they kind of are across the gambit. So ultimately, if you're trying to get an issue in front of your member of Congress and are not a raging donor and have easy access to them, the staffer is the way to go. So the easiest thing to do is to just Google them. Andy did provide a slide earlier with their office numbers in DC, the 202 numbers. So we'll say you want to contact Senator Cantwell because you heard that the landless bill passed the House today and you do not want the Senate to even consider it for a vote. So you'll Google her phone number and you'll call her office. If you want to maintain contact and you keep the staffer abreast of information that you might want to be sharing with them in the future, then you would just ask them for the environmental staffer's contact information and they will share it with you. The House contact is usually first name dot last name at house.mail.gov, whereas the Senate emails are first name underscore last name at the senator's name dot senate.gov. So it's easy to kind of just have at least the last part down and then have them spell the name of their staffer if it's a little complicated. So I definitely always encourage people to call if they're able, just because the the interns at the front desk will take note in a spreadsheet, and that then is directly reported to the member of Congress. Staffer emails can kind of get lost. I mean, I can, just thinking about my own inbox on the listservs, on the, whatever, all the things I'm signed up for, the Hill News or what have you, like things do get lost and we are all human. So I really opt to call the office rather than email, but it's good to do both, especially again, if you're trying to maintain or build a relationship rather and maintain that over the course of time. And really, post-COVID, most congressional meetings are happening online, which actually lowers the barrier for constituents to meet with DC staffers. Before I started working for the John Muir Project, I was kind of a rogue lobbyist where I was just running around the Hill listening to, or hoping anybody would listen to me. I was advocating for Peace Corps volunteers, and so it can feel like you're not important because you're not some high paid lobbyist, but they work for you. Living in DC, I don't really have a active member of Congress anymore. So I think a lot of the time we think, oh, my civic duty is to vote, but I would emphasize that your civic duty is also to hold your member of Congress accountable, and that is by contacting them relentlessly if you have the time to make sure that your voice is heard. And honestly, again, the best way to do that is to call. But if you're wanting to maintain a relationship with a staffer, I would definitely ask for the environmental staffer's number and just, don't harass them too much, but just keep them abreast of situations that you may or be familiar with in your own backyard that they might not have eyes and ears on. Yeah. Next slide, please. Awesome. Channels to Congress. So we kind of already talked about this. Calling is the best way to do this. Again, very easy to Google. Senator Cantwell, 202 number. Her other offices will have, your local area codes. It's if you want a call back, they're willing to, but again, just ask for the staffer's email and then you can maintain contact and relationship building through that. In-person town halls and district office visits can be very impactful, but that's also a lot more time consuming for folks. Again, DC don't have a car, things are expensive right now, so you might not have the time or the money to go kind of maintain a watchful eye on your member of Congress. But that's still a great way to try and to get your voice heard. A town, or even on the local level. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Lynn. He does really great work at his local council, but that's obviously on the local level. But I just want to make a plug for that if you can. Written correspondence. So again, email is perfectly fine. I try to give staffers as much grace as possible because I'm sure all of our inbox are overloaded with information. And so especially when writing an email to a staffer, if it's just informational, I just put info, usually I'm sharing an article or something that I think is useful for them to just have in the back of their mind. But if you want an actual meeting, then I put meeting request : and usually the bill number or the topic that I'm really wanting to emphasize. And I really like to put in brackets if I have a constituent that's coming along with the meeting to kind of give it a little bit more of a, I guess, pressure point in hopes that they will respond. But do not be offended. Do not be worried if they're not responsive within the first week or two. I like to give them a little bit of a grace period, especially if Congress is in session. And that's something really easy that you can Google to see if they are in session. Excuse me. So just give them a little bit of grace, about a week or two, and it's perfectly legitimate in a week or two's time to just reply and be like, hi, I know you're really busy. I just really wanted to get this meeting on the books because I'm really concerned or I'm really supportive of X, Y, and Z. And I just want to make sure you know. And I assume some of you may or may not live in similar districts, definitely similar states. You can do this together, right? It doesn't have to be a Lone Ranger situation. You can CC as many people that you think would want to come to this meeting. Granted, you're going to then have to herd the cats to make sure the time works for everybody, but you can do it, right? We have the people power. We just don't, unfortunately, have probably the financial power, but you are more than capable and allowed to lobby your member of Congress's office for bills that you, again, do not support or do support. So hearing testimony kind of gets a little bit more into the weeds of things. There was a really obnoxious hearing this Tuesday in the Senate on the Agriculture Committee. It was an oversight hearing on the Forest Service. Really, it felt more like a plug for the Fix Our Forest Act, which was really frustrating. Fix Our Forest has passed out of the House last January. They kind of used the LA fires to pressure members into passing it. It has passed out of the Senate committee last October. The word on the Hill, unfortunately, is that they're waiting for the next catastrophic fire to happen. And when John Muir Project uses the term catastrophic wildfire, we are talking about when homes and or lives are lost, because fire is not catastrophic in fire adapted ecosystems, yet that is what we constantly are told by members of Congress and our federal agencies. So the hearings we can definitely maybe go over more in Q&A, but certain chambers, I honestly haven't submitted testimony for any of the hearings this Congress, just because it's a long, frustrating process. So I'm more than happy to answer questions if there's any, real meaty things people want to get into, if you're wanting to really become a rogue lobbyist. The other option is tagging members of Congress in social media posts. We were just in a bunch of giant sequoia groves, one of them in Mariposa, where they're logging for fuels reduction after the fires out there. and I don't think most people understand that logging is happening on national parks in this term. So we're putting a package together, then tag California representatives, even though we requested that they come on a field trip, but of course they were too busy. Legacy media. This is what I really like to lean on. If an office is ignoring me, even after I'm trying to get a constituent in to talk with them, we go to op-eds and letters to the editor. There was a California office that was just avoiding us, avoiding us, avoiding us. So finally, push came to shove, and something he had done something in a hearing, and it was kind of a perfect opportunity. So my boss and his colleague had an op-ed published in the New York Times, and I still have the voicemail. Their comms person called me the day it was published and was like, "What are you talking about? What, why would you try to talk to us?" And I was like, "I have the email. Like, we've been trying to talk to you." So that is kind of when push comes to shove and you're not getting anywhere with the office. I like to go to newspapers and try and get them to listen that way. Next slide, please. Okay, what gets members' attentions? So concise and consistent. I mean, we're all busy, and this is their job and they're supposed to do it, but the elevator pitch, if short and concise, especially if you're calling, "I live in your district, I would like you to oppose X, Y, and Z," but there's also I always like to give an alternative. Like, I think a lot of the time my job is to tell Congress what they're doing wrong, but there are positive facets, like Huffman and Padilla's Community Protection and Wildfire Resilience Act, or the Northern Rockies Ecosystem Protection Act. There are ways to put, like, please stop doing this, but here's something you can support instead. I do like to try and give because, we're all delicate snowflakes at the end of the day and don't like to be told that we're doing it wrong. So I really like to try and give constructive feedback and criticism in the sense that, I understand this is the way things have been done, but we can do it a different way, right? Really making a habit of in your weekly routine to set aside 10 minutes each week, because I'm sure we're all plugged into the news, right? Even if it's not an environmental issue. The Farm Bill passed in the House and the Senate, I think, is kind of hung up because they cut out a lot of the SNAP benefits. So you can tangle things together, right? These are your representatives. You do pay their salaries. They work for you. So you just need to be very clear and concise. If it's a phone call, try and keep it under 30 seconds. An email, just remember the staffers have emails upon emails that are probably sitting unread in their inboxes. Like, I don't even want to know how many, but it's still our job to kind of do their job for them, if that makes sense. We're keeping them informed. I really like to, I used to kind of spam them weekly with articles that I thought were good, but I've really tried to kind of pare that back. But if there is something that's bothering you and you're trying to maintain that relationship, I think, messaging them, once a month and maybe just hyperlinking things and being like, I know you're busy, but I just thought this was interesting. It is helpful for them because they do miss a lot of stuff. So again, we're trying to keep them informed of what they might be missing. These, like, timber sales in your backyard, things of that nature, and just making sure that they're aware that you're keeping an eye on it and you hope that they are too, because you're concerned about, this fuels reduction project in the name of saving the watershed, right? Anything of that nature, or again, even outside of the environmental realm, but I don't want to comment on that. But you do you. Yeah, as the slide said, sometimes you have to be okay being a pest, but just in a more what's the phrase I'm looking, just in a timely fashion, I suppose. Next slide, please.
I think we were going to switch off here. And this actually is a great idea that Jen gave me. And there's a lot of words here. We don't need to read through all of it. But kind of the idea is that as you're building your muscle as an advocate for public lands, you might think of yourself as one of the that's helping to in their kind of circular, chaotic way that nature does things. And kind of this is, almost maybe more time, or you get your relationships built with staffers, and you know that you're able to make the most of your time, you might consider kind of changing your approach. So a really simple approach might be that like the nutrients in the forest. So as weathering occurs, as the salmon are returning from their time out at sea, as the fungi are doing their thing, they're constantly contributing nutrients. And so you might be constantly contributing some feedback to Congress. So maybe a once a week call, like Jenn just said, really, if you can get in touch with the public land staffer or the environmental staffer, that's going to be the best bang for your buck. But maybe you have a little bit more time than that. And so a windstorm, especially in the Northwest, we've had a few historic ones, but every year strong winds come through and knock down a few old trees, maybe that were towards the end of their life cycle or had been damaged in some other way. And those storms make space for good things to crop up. So you might spend maybe a little bit more time than you were previously. Make a call, maybe if you're a social media person, engage with social media a little bit, or like you're all at least a little bit into either LFDC or John Muir project. And so, seeing what your local organizations are up to, see if they've put out any action alerts, or fact sheets, or any of the ways that organizations might be trying to help increase awareness about things that are going on in Congress. More dramatic than that, the wildfires, like Jenn just said, wildfires are not the enemy of the forest. They're a really normal forest. A burned forest is still forest. It's just in a different form than we see in a fairy tale. And they're actually crucial. Like Jenn was just talking about in sequoia groves, you can get sequoias to germinate without fire, but it's at a tiny rate. But when those fires come through, the sequoia seedlings start popping up just as dense as you could think. They're like blades of grass in the turf at a football field. And so those fires are actually doing a lot of good, but they are pretty dramatic, right? And so what we're asking for there is maybe half an hour a week. That's going to be kind of a little bit of all the things that you would otherwise be doing, but maybe you're also, sending a couple of those emails that we were just talking about. You're checking in. Maybe when you call, you can ask the next time your member is going to be local in your area, if they have any town halls or if they have any other sort of events at their office. Because really being able to be face to face with your legislator is going to be, that adds a lot. Them hearing your voice and seeing the look in your eyes when you're talking about things that you're passionate about can have a lot bigger impact than, maybe they're just, if you're only sending an email, then all they're getting is a report from a staffer on how many emails they got on a topic. So, obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of emotion with that. And then there's the pest. That's the rogue, the vigilante lobbyist who's trying to take advantage of every legal and respectful means that they have to engage with their legislators. Maybe you start to establish relationships with your local paper and the environmental writers that are there, and encourage them, let them know about projects that are going on, either, with the National Forest or bills that maybe aren't getting a lot of traction in the press, and you want to encourage your local paper to write a piece on that, or you do the writing yourself and submit an op-ed or a letter to the editor. And then really trying to spread the news, right? Finding opportunities when you're standing in line at the grocery store. Maybe there's a magazine there with a photo of something nature related, and you end up striking a conversation with somebody, or whatever it might be. Just trying to let more folks know about the issues that are going on. It's unfortunately, maybe it's just always the case, but we live in a time where there's a lot of seemingly urgent issues that need tending to. And so, we're all kind of vying for a little bit of that bandwidth from our Congress people. And certainly the more they hear from constituents on an issue, the more likely they're going to be to actually act on their constituents' best interest. And so that's really just kind of a framework, just encouraging, the mindset of you need to be persistent. A lot of times it might feel somewhat discouraging. I know even as a member of a environmental organization, sometimes I call and I don't get through to the person that I'm trying to get through to, and it's like, why did I just spend 10 minutes not accomplishing anything? But it really does take a little bit of persistence and creativity, and a lot of times you throw three things at the wall and one sticks, and that's all you need is a little. Those small victories can really start to add up, especially when we're using the power of numbers. And yeah, some other things that you might consider if calls to your senator's office aren't working, your emails aren't getting answered. Some of our local politicians, whether that's at the state level or even all the way down to city councilors or really local politicians, they're going to have. It's almost like Jen mentioned. As soon as it was in the paper, she got a call from the PR person from whoever it was. As soon as the governor calls about it, or they get the email from that more authoritative office, that's going to get attention a lot faster than just some random Gmail. So trying to build relationships with local politicians that are like-minded with you, that are interested in seeing improvement and responsible management, responsible care, stewardship of our national forests and our public lands in general. That can be a really powerful tool. I mentioned at the opening that engaging with local tribal governments can be really a good use of time. It can be something that bears a lot of fruit. I would say people come in every different opinion, regardless of whether they're associated with a political party or a tribal government or otherwise. But I have found personally that tribal governments tend to be maybe a little bit more concerned with environmental issues than the normal state or city government might be. And so you might be able to reach out and start to establish a relationship, show that you're a supporter of whether they're relying on fishing, or they have a strong tie to cultural use of forests, that sort of thing. They're looking for advocates just like everybody else is. So starting to build those relationships and find ways to collaborate, and maybe you end up hosting some sort of event that's shining light on a bill that's going to do some harm, or a bill that's going to do some good would be even better. And then the last one there, it may be a bit of a long shot, but there are occasionally for-profit organizations that want to see the world improve rather than just make people wealthier. So definitely REI comes to mind as an organization that has in the past done a little bit of, the one that comes to mind specifically with REI was last year when there was a senator from Utah that was interested in selling off some of our public lands during one of the big bills that they were trying to pass. And REI came out hard in opposition to that privatization of public land. So when you're shopping out in town, looking for organization or looking for businesses that you think might share your values, and then looking for maybe they're taking initiatives and they're looking for people to get involved, to volunteer at an event or otherwise, that can be something that really, those events that especially those big corporations coming out for or against a bill, can definitely get the attention of Congress people.
Yeah, I know Patagonia has more like localized stores, and you can go in and ask to host events. They're usually pretty decent on that. And just one last thing on the local level. I don't know why this is, but a lot of the time the DC staffers and the local staffers don't seem to really communicate much. It's kind of like the chambers in Congress, like a staffer might be like, "Well, where's the Senate on this?" And it's like, "Isn't that your job?" It's it's a little beyond, but so if for some reason the DC office isn't really cooperating, you can definitely pivot to the local office, but it is also good to kind of keep the local office alert of anything going on, especially if it's like timber sale related. Or even like just like let's go on a hike. Like I want to like talk to you outside. It doesn't hurt to try, right? One of these days, a staffer is going to take you up on that. And you're going to be able to show them like this is what they mean when they're saying forest management. And it's just log decks, and it's not protecting our homes. But yeah, so building habits. Again, I know we're all very busy and we're all very put out by the constant, unfortunate news that is just blanketing our mind space. And so, if you can just try and establish a routine, whether it's Memo Monday or Testify Tuesday or Washington Wednesday, that's what I've kind of tried to implement is like I'll send a Forest Facts Friday fact sheet out to staffers. It might just be a fun way for you to try and maintain involvement in our, democracy, if you call it that at this point. So really just trying to find an avenue. You could be out on a hike and be like, just sharing a picture like, this is why I want you to support X bill or Y bill. Just trying to keep it light and reminding staffers why you love your public lands and why you want them to remain in public hands. I think that just trying to find the bright spots where we can. And I think staffers also appreciate that because as much as DC has its charm, it's hot and oppressive over here. So really could probably benefit from some cheery photos of your public lands. Although I was just out in California and it was mostly documenting destruction. So hopefully you're not in that camp with me. Although if you're ever in the Sequoias and you're in the Redwood Mountain Grove, the high intensity patches are coming back lovely and they have not been touched yet, hopefully at all. So I will make a plug for our beloved Sequoias. But I think we're at the end for Q&A. Am I missing one?
No, I think that is it. Yeah, I just kind of want to add to that as far as the building habits goes. I did touch on it briefly, but it can be sometimes discouraging. It can feel like you're not making progress and like you're just beating your head against the wall. And that's when, getting friends and family and folks involved to kind of, share energy and share ideas can be really encouraging. And then, think of it almost as, going to the gym or going on a workout or going for a run. You might not necessarily enjoy it in the moment, but you know that over time that effort is going to add up to something really important. And it's going to make you a better person. And it's going to make the world hopefully a little bit better place. And those habits really start to eventually feel good and make a difference. And certainly, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here because there's not a whole lot of value in that. So certainly for me personally, why did my video turn off? If you are feeling like you're kind of at a dead end, that's my role at LFDC is to be engaging with the public as much as possible and enabling folks with effective tools and ideas and leveraging the interest and will of the public as much as possible for protection of public forests. So yeah, that is our presentation. Jen, did you have anything that you wanted to add right off the bat?
No, I mean, I liked the gym analogy, exercise your civic-minded muscle. You have a right to lobby your congressperson, even if it's not your job. I mean, in a sense, it kind of is, right? But, these, it can be daunting, it can be frustrating, but, Andy is here. I'm also happy to for lack of a better phrase, shoot the shit with you if you're feeling frustrated because it is a frustrating position. But the staffers to try and give them some, they are overwhelmed. They do mean well, but again, we have to be that polite pest that's kind of just buzzing around. Like we need our bugs, right? We're kind of in an insect collapse, but I'll save that for another conversation. Yeah, but happy to answer questions. I know I definitely kind of get all over the place sometimes, but yeah, hopefully we've encouraged and not discouraged to be more engaged with your members of Congress. We have to hold them accountable. It's not just at the ballot box. And we've got some bills you can, call and oppose now, and support. So if you want to talk about, possible bills that you might be interested in flagging for your representative and senators, I'm happy to, yeah, chat about that.
Yeah. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. We have David already got one queued up in the chat, and kind of just related to what's a reasonable frequency for. It's a delicate balance between being a pest and also being a welcome voice on the other end of the phone. What do you think about that, Jen?
Well, no, his question was how frequently do staff members turn over in congressional
Oh,
office?
I'm sorry. I read too quickly.
Um, yeah, I honestly, David, was like, someone's gonna ask this and I'm not gonna have a great answer. It's really unknown. Like the staffer I had the most contact with for years just left, so it's kind of a bummer because you do have to then rebuild that relationship. But that's why it's really important to maintain kind of constant contact, in hopes that when they do leave, they'll either pass you, they'll alert you and let you know who's coming in to take their place. So that's why it is really important to try and maintain those contacts, semi-frequently. Again, we want to be a pest, but not in the sense where you're going to probably get put into the spam folder kind of thing, or they're going to ignore your phone calls. But again, they do work for you. They are here to help you, and yeah, we need to help them do their jobs better in the sense of better safeguarding our public lands. Hopefully that was thanks, David, for the affirmation.
Yeah. But what, just before we move on to Eddie, I just want to add, if you are calling and trying to get in touch with a staffer, and you're having trouble, let me know. Their contact information is publicly available, but it's very hard to find sometimes. For Jen and I, we can find it very quickly. So if you really want, if you're, want to get the public lands or the environmental staffer's email or the phone number that might ring at their desk, although that can be a little tricky, let us know and we can assist in that. Eddie, what do you got? It's good to see you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I've always been kind of curious. We all know that everything that's put forward related to the environment these days means the opposite of what it says. But I've always wondered, do the Congress people get fooled by that? Like when it says fix our forest act, we all know it's really harming the forest. Do they get fooled by that? Because I never know in my comments, do I need to first tell them don't believe what it says and then tell them why? Or do they already know not to believe what it says?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, unfortunately, I think they're so ingrained in the agencies, right? Like just yeah, how the House passed the Fix Our Forest Act at like before even the ashes settled in LA was really atrocious. And all, those fires weren't even in the forest to begin with.
Right.
Um, so it I think they get guilt tripped and they just I think they rely a lot on public polling and messaging and they're like, I'm gonna get reamed if I don't vote for this. It's more of a guilt. I don't think they really see reason a lot of the time when they're voting for things for better or worse. And that kind of goes into Gail's question about the status of the landless legislation. The landless bill passed today by unanimous consent, which means by voice vote. So we don't even have a documentation of who would have voted for or against it, right? The same thing happened with the Save Our Sequoias earlier this spring. I mean, ultimately, I just think they're not always taking in that information or they're just being lobbied harder by the other side. So that's why we really need constituents to, rise to the challenge and hold, your members of Congress accountable. Action alerts are great. They do get the numbers out there and the people's voices heard, but it's really imperative that we call offices and try and talk them through this because I think when they hear it from regular folks, and I don't mean that pejoratively, I mean that in a celebratory way, that it has a harder hit. You guys are educated and you know what's happening in your backyard, so hearing from you guys rather than environmental lobbyists or industry lobbyists, I think is really helpful because it adds an extra layer of what is it just I think it really gives that conversation a little bit more weight since you are voting for or against their boss in the midterms or in the general. I hope that was an okay answer. I wish I could see into the crystal ball, but it's very foggy and muggy and it's just I don't want to speculate and but yeah.
So my takeaway is they sometimes do get fooled by the language. So I do need to keep trying to tell them, first of all, this doesn't mean what it says. It means the opposite, and then get into why it's bad.
And I mean, and this is Andy did a great overview of the civics, but I think also I don't the conversations I'll have sometimes after a bill passes is, and to invoke a kind of scary ex-member of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene recently acknowledged when she was still in the House that she didn't see this one provision. I think it was for like AI or something, and she was adamantly opposed and would not have voted for it otherwise. And this is where we get in a lot of trouble with these big omnibus packages, right? We have the farm bill that has, was supposed to pass 3 years ago. The House passed theirs and the Senate their version is supposed to drop at some point this month, but there's a very small window of time for them to go to conference and actually hash this out. My hope is the Dems will force another continuing resolution as much as I'm opposed to those normally. But in this, lunatic of an administration, we really should stop giving them wins. That's kind of my message to Democrats when I'm talking to them. why are we handing this administration anything further? It's just detrimental to the greater good. So I think your approach is great. Really just kind of laying it out for them, and unfortunately, the shorter the better. Staffers really don't read anything. We try and keep our fact sheets to one page, but even then, I think they're just, we'll get into the meeting and I'm like, did you read the fact sheet? And they're like, that's what the meeting's for, right? And I'm like, okay, fine. So, you know,
Yeah.
in mind, if you have the time, great. If not, like just really brief, like meeting request, colon, opposing the landless bill S2254, and just then, and it's nice with the Zoom meetings. I didn't really cover this, so apologies. You have a decent solid at least 30 minutes usually with staffers if you're going to meet with them over Zoom. As much as COVID was really terrible, it kind of shifted the map when it came to congressional offices because I would go alone and, we'd have a 30-minute meeting set, but things would happen and I'd be lucky to get 5 minutes in the hallway. Now I can bring scientists, constituents, concerned members of what have you into these meetings, and I get anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes a lot of the time. So it is really good to try and maintain that contact and relationship because they will answer you. You just have to be, as Andy keeps saying, a persistent pest. That is our job, is to hold them accountable and really hold their feet to the fire. But yeah, I really appreciate that question, Eddie. And yeah, if there's any other follow-ups, please. Or yeah, if Andy has anything.
Yeah, just to go all the way back to the initial question from Eddie, I think one way we could look at it is who are the sponsors of bills. And so, for example, Fix Our Forest Act has bipartisan sponsorship. So the Democrats that are sponsoring it, they definitely know what's in the bill. So it's not always that they don't understand what's in the bill. It might be that ecology is quite complicated, and most Congress people they're not biologists, they're not conservationists, they're not ecologists, so they might not realize that fire is a healthy thing for forest ecosystems, and so it might not be that they're being obtuse or making shady deals. It might be that they just don't understand the science, or the Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent fires, stop all fires as soon as possible. That's ingrained in a lot of, especially the generation that's in Congress right now, especially in the Senate. That's kind of what they grew up with, right? And so it's just some of it is Congress being not the best examples of what it is to be a good person. Some of it's just that they don't necessarily know the reality, and it's just a kind and honest conversation about, hey, this isn't, I know that this is what we've believed for the last 7,500 years, but here's what the more recent research shows. And John Muir Project especially is fantastic at putting out fact sheets and action alerts that have just like an entire, it'll be a one-page fact sheet and then it'll be 2 pages of citations. And those citations are a great place to be like, hey, maybe just cut out a few excerpts from a particular paper that really kind of summarizes it from the extract or the abstract or from the summary of the paper, and that can be a really useful tool in making sure that at least they know what the reality is, whether they want to admit it or not. They've been told once at least what the truth is about forest ecology.
Yeah, and just one more caveat. I do like to lead with questions, assuming makes an ass out of you and me kind of thing. The staffers are very overwhelmed. I would never want to be one. However, that is why we are here to help them see through the smokescreen that is industry and agency, for lack of a better propaganda, right? And I put in some two unbranded fact sheets. They are not short, but they are very full of information that will hopefully be helpful with any talking points. But yeah, it's just trying to kind of meet them where they're at and show them the way, like a lot of offices didn't want to meet initially because they're like, well, you're just telling me we're doing it wrong. And I'm like, yeah, but I have solutions, right? I'm not just coming down on you to come down on you. I have alternatives to your business as usual approach. So, it's a little sussing and trying to get a read on the staffer because they might be a little bit thicker skinned and can just have a conversation, whereas there are some that kind of need to be more handheld and, you know, we all need to be affirmed. That's probably my primary love language is affirmation. So, it's fine. But yeah, I think yeah, that's yeah, all I have to say about that. So yeah, I put in some fact sheets and then let's go to are we done, Eddie and Andy? Should we move on? Okay, unless you have follow-ups. But yeah. Gail, what is the status of the landless legislation? What is the official position of the Alaska tribes involved? Andy, I will defer to you if you want.
Yeah, so it did just pass the House yesterday. As Jen mentioned, we don't we voted on it because they didn't make everybody vote individually. And then it's been introduced to the Senate. It still is in committee in the Senate, so it still will go through. Go out, it needs to get out of committee, and then they'll have to reconcile the two versions of the bill because they are not identical, and then the Senate will have to pass it. It's generally a higher bar to get something out of the Senate, unless it's a few exceptions like the Farm Bill and appropriations bills. It needs 60 votes. So obviously, right now there's not a whole lot that's going to get 60 votes in the Senate. But there is obviously a chance that it could. Jen mentioned the Farm Bill, which has like half of FOFA in it, and a lot of other unfortunate bills are just tacked right in there. So there's some chance that will happen. As far as the official position of Alaska tribes, tribal governments have not come out in favor or against the bill that I'm aware of. So there are certainly some Alaska tribal leaders who are advocating against the bill. And we have a great documentary, kind of just a short film that you can find on our website if you go to the Alaska section of our website, and learn kind of firsthand what some of the Alaska Native tribal leaders have to say about the bill, and kind of the history of the rest of the framework that the bill kind of builds upon. And so it will, like I said, there's some chance that it would get a full vote in the Senate. So that would take probably a filibuster from a Democrat to stop it if it really gets that much momentum in the Senate. So calling Cantwell or Murray or Wyden or whoever else is on the West Coast here, and asking them, explaining the trouble with the bill, and that you would like them to filibuster it is certainly a reasonable thing to do. I think probably there's a higher chance that some version of it on Farm Bill or otherwise, in which case, unfortunately, the Dems can't really do a whole lot to stop it in that case, because that would get passed by a simple majority. So hopefully that answers the question. And feel free to chime in, Gail, if there was a follow-up there.
Yeah, and if you do have a follow-up while you're coming off mute or putting in the chat, this is a good reason to maintain pressure on the senators. I think Cantwell did come out in opposition, so really just asking her, we appreciate your opposition. If this does come to the floor, will you filibuster? It's really great to have a specific ask. It's fine to educate and keep staffers and offices informed, but when there's something like this on the table, it's really imperative when you call, having a small ask. Will your boss oppose this on the Senate floor and help us kill it in the Senate? Just being kind of clear. And if there's ever anything that comes up and you need help with like messaging or talking points, like Andy and I are happy to, talk it through and walk you through that. Yeah. And then I noticed, Colleen, I'm happy to kind of go over the Fix Our Forest Act, but Gail, I do believe Murray is against the landless bill, right, Andy?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would have to defer to you on that.
Well, I was talking to Josh earlier. I'm almost positive. But again, even if she's come out against it, it's still great to have the public pressure on members of Congress, even if they're publicly opposing or supporting things, and you fall into those camps. It's still good to keep up the pressure so they don't forget. Members of Congress, their offices are very forgetful. Like I said, there's over almost 10,000 bills in the House. There are a lot of balls in the air. So again, it is our job to keep them up to date on their job, which I know it makes no sense. Go ahead.
One last thing on landless. So as Jen mentioned earlier, if we're asking them to oppose a bill, it's super helpful if you can be like, we would support this instead. And if you're interested in some of those options, either email me Andrew at WLFDC.org, or just send us a message through our website. There's one bill in particular, the Afford Act, which is a different way, uses kind of tax incentives and government funding to send money directly to the communities that land this bill is supposed to be helping. So it would avoid clear cutting a bunch of old growth, but would still help communities that really do genuinely need some help. The home ownership rate in Southeast Alaska among Native tribes is extremely low, and that's one of the things that the Afford Act addresses, is trying to make it easier for folks to get loans for permanent housing and for all sorts of community development. And so there are bills that are being considered that would help the same communities that are supposedly being helped by the landless bill.
Yeah, I mean, do you have the numbers for that?
Afford, I'll have it in the next 30 seconds for you.
Yeah, so basically calling the Fix Our Forests Act would roll back all environmental laws. They are on shaky ground as it is, but we still want them where they are until we can make them stronger. And there was a recent provision that kind of came to light. A lot of the time, they're basically trying to stop legislation or litigation, rather. So, yes, John Muir Project is in a handful of lawsuits across the board. But again, these are to stop destructive projects that would make fires burn hotter and faster towards communities. And, the pictures we have, we're going to have a Substack later on our recent Sequoia visit. I mean, these aren't small diameter trees, right? I think the most frustrating part about my job is listening to these hearings week in and week out, and the Dems are like, well, they're only taking small diameter trees. When I ask staffers, what does that mean? Are we talking about a Christmas tree? No one can really give me an answer. And when you go to these areas, they're ginormous. They're fire adapted trees that they're removing, for commercial purposes. So the Fix Our Forest Act would not make communities safer. It would expand categorical exclusions that are already at 3,000 acres to 10,000 acres. And a lot of the problem, I know you guys are West Coast based, probably most of you, but all of these issues are trickling out to the east. And they're like, well, we don't want to burn up like California, so we're going to start cutting down our forests in the name of fire. All of our fire adapted ecosystems across the country have experienced fire in some capacity. So the way we go about protecting human communities is doing home hardening and defensible space. Those are some of the bills that we put into the chat that are alternatives to support instead of FOFA. But the piece that David flagged is definitely kind of goes more into the nitty gritty of it all. But it just would accelerate the climate. I mean, forest management emits 10 times more carbon than wildfires and bark beetles combined. Harris et al. 2020 or Harris et al. 2016. We are pouring accelerant onto the problem by managing the forest this way. Yeah, Citizens Climate Lobby is pro Fix Our Forests. We've had multiple conversations with people in that organization. I know a lot of their members are personally opposed, and they have been actively lobbying Citizens Climate Lobby to withdraw their support of it. But we're up against the behemoth that is the logging industry, and that's both, agency science, but like one of the fact sheets lists agency science that shows that active forest management actually is more detrimental than helpful. So yeah, it's a frustrating time, but again, with our powers combined, we can hold Congress accountable and really hold their feet to the fire with citizens lobbying, unlike Citizen Climate Lobby Group. Sorry, anyways. I don't see any more questions in the chat unless somebody else wants to. Yeah, sorry, Colleen. That was hopefully a little bit comprehensive, but yeah, there's plenty of information on our website. And yeah, happy to answer more questions offline if anything else comes up.
Any other questions? I guess not. That's okay. We're right at the end of the hour. It looks like Joshua logged on. I think Joshua, you missed. We did just spend a portion of the last 50 minutes talking about land lists, the status of it, and how to get in touch with your senator to encourage a filibuster if that is deemed necessary. But feel free to, if you have any other specific updates that you'd like to give us, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I got pulled into another call, but I'm sure you already talked about this, but the bill passed out of the House this morning by unanimous consent, meaning that there weren't any Democrats who were really willing to make an issue of it, which is extremely concerning. And right now, our only real hope for the bill is getting a filibuster in the Senate. It hasn't passed out of committee in the Senate yet, so if everybody on this call calls both Patty Murray and Marie Cantwell, asking for a filibuster, that would certainly be noted. They take calls much more seriously than they take um, other means of communication. So doing that in the next couple of days would have a really big impact. And please check out our website for more info on the bill. It's quite a um, it's quite a it's quite a bill to understand. And there's a big narrative out there that it's good. And historically, that hasn't been the case. So, yeah, please do call Cantwell and Murray about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of follow-up information. There's also a really great Substack podcast I put in the chat. Joshua and Wanda were on to talk about the issues and concerns behind it. Because they are trying to sell it. Yeah, and it's anyways. And then I'm putting the DC offices for those two senators. But yeah, is there any other questions? Thanks, David.
I think that's all.